Welcome to the Leaderish Podcast with your hosts, Regina and Doris. Hey, Doris, how's it going?
Hey, Regina, it's going very well. How about you?
Going great. I'm super excited today because we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Lauren Kiproff-Downer, and Lauren and I met at an ATD conference a couple weeks ago where Lauren was privileged to be a speaker on culture, and I was so enamored by her presentation that I asked her to join us on this podcast. So welcome, Lauren.
Welcome,
Hi.
Lauren.
Hi, Regina. Hi, Doris. Lovely to be here. Very, very excited to get to be joining everyone today.
Well, thank you. Lauren, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and let our listeners know why you're special?
Absolutely. Why I'm special. I could go on
Uh-huh.
for hours, but
I know.
I am an organizational psychologist, master's level organizational development consultant, big nerd when it comes to trying to find ways to help make companies the places where people are going to be able to thrive. And really to be able to help leaders to figure out those key pieces to be able to lead their teams forward in ways that make their employees feel like they belong and like they're valued, and that it becomes something where everybody feels like they're able to give and get their best. I also like trying different things and looking into different directions for ways to make things better for people no matter where they are. And so it's something I get really excited about. When I met Regina, it was actually my first time doing a speaking engagement like that, but
It was?
I'm so passionate about culture that I was like, I just want to talk about it. So that's part of why we're here chatting, and I'm really excited to talk about it more with you now.
Okay, well, you felt like a total pro
Well,
when you
thank you.
were on that stage talking to 100 and something people. That was amazing. I had no idea it was your first time. Well, congratulations on that. Also, I just want to say that I'm a nerd too. So let's nerd out.
The best of us are. That sounds like the best thing ever.
I was hoping Doris would chime in and be like, I'm a nerd too.
I'm a nerd too.
And there it is. Okay.
And there it is.
So
But we might all be nerds about different things.
That's right. That's right. So we'll all just nerd out a little bit in our own ways today.
And to be a nerd about one of my favorite words is pejorative. And I remember hearing a broadcast where they talked about the word nerd and that it is no longer pejorative, meaning a negative connotation. That nerd is a very positive connotation. And nerds are awesome people. So all of us that are nerds, let's stand proud in our nerdiness.
Yeah, everybody's a nerd about something, and we should be celebrating.
Yeah.
Let's rock the inner nerd, ladies. Let's let that be something we're excited about.
Let's rock the inner nerd. I love that. Might have to put that on a bumper sticker.
You do, I want one.
Well, Lauren, can you define culture for us as we dive right into this episode?
The first thing that you should be thinking about is if you ask a room of 20 people what culture means to them, you're going to get 20 different answers. A few people looking at you confused, and then a few people saying, well, I don't really know. And that's part of why we're here talking about it, because it means different things in different places. I had a professor of mine in grad school say, culture is one of those things that it is what it is, and you'll know it when you see it. But for any of you that might be hearing us right now that are like, well, that's just maddeningly unhelpful. So what in the world is it? A good starting place definition is thinking about culture in terms of the attitudes and behaviors of employees within an organization. It's the pieces that govern how a company feels, what the personality of an organization or a team are, and those things that kind of set a foundation for what the company or team or whatever else it might be will feel like, what we're aspiring to achieve when we're setting up the overall demeanor for the way a team or a company feels.
That was really cool because it is like that just overall feeling is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
exactly.
It sounds a little bit like vision or mission. So you might see those words plastered on the wall of a company. So it sounds like if you can just put that vision on the wall of the company, all problems are solved, right?
Oh, I wish it were that simple. The vision, the mission, those are incredibly important things. And I know in a previous episode of this podcast, you were able to dive very beautifully and meaningfully into kind of some of those pieces. But this is a place to be thinking about really what is written on the wall and what that actually means for the company or for the team going forward. I wish it set everything just magic wand, that's perfect, we're there, but it's more of a guiding line to what you're wanting to achieve, what you want it to be like.
So it's like how a team, a leader, or an organization lives out that vision, the behaviors that they demonstrate every day, the small choices that they make every day to live out that vision becomes the culture.
Absolutely, or at least that's what we're going for. When it comes to all of that, there are other pieces that might be looking at how well you're doing and achieving those things you're aspiring to from a cultural standpoint, but the culture sets the stage for what you want the demeanor of the team, the personality of the team or organization to be feeling like and looking like.
So, what can companies do to start moving in the right direction?
Well, it starts off with some intentionality about clarifying what you really mean by those things. Common one that I see is something like authenticity, which is fantastic. But you've got to be thinking a little bit more in terms of okay, if you want this to be an authentic workplace, what might that look like for the people that are actually there in the day to day on that team? What does it mean for people that are members of that organization or under the leadership of that leader to be working and doing things authentically? If you don't take the time to think about it, yeah, that sounds great, but what direction are we taking there? How are we really taking that captive? And what's meant by that? So making sure that you're really expressing that well from the beginning, that if you're going to be choosing certain words to be part of your cultural statements, your mission, your vision, that you're putting them together in a way where people can be clear about what you're actually trying to achieve in any of that, what it might look like, or at least what you have in mind when you get there. Some other things to be thinking about in that situation about culture. Culture becomes something that's more long term. This is how we want the team to be as we're building, as we're going forward in our success. What are we looking at as far as what those ideals are? Now, as you might have figured out if you've been listening thus far and as we've been talking, that can be something that's easier said than done when it comes to really being able to measure. You might have great objectives, great intentionality for what your culture would look like or what's going on. But if you can't really necessarily even talk about it cohesively from the very beginning, it might be a harder thing to know how to put your hands around as far as how are we really measuring what this means? How are we communicating that to people? And then how are we aligning with it and following it?
Do you have a 1 or 2, 3-step process on how companies can do that, how they can make that a little bit easier on themselves?
Well, I think it can be something challenging, obviously, but one thing to be doing is looking at the current mission statement that you have. If there's certain things, let's say a common one that I see is responsiveness or collaboration. Well, yeah, we want to be collaborative. Let's start by thinking about big picture. What does that mean for an entire company? And then those of you that are leaders of humans that might be in a situation where, let's say there's going to be collaboration across teams. What might that end up looking like in terms of the day to day processes that your people are going through, the people that they're going to be working with, and how that might flow. It's important to be able to think about that because then you can plan strategically what you're going to be doing to help to promote the success of all of it to make that ideal culture that you're wanting to achieve actually have legs and be the thing that is what they're actually getting to experience and what's really going on.
So it sounds like to me that the organization's responsibility is to define the culture. So
Absolutely.
maybe the organization's responsibility is to define what collaboration or responsiveness means,
Precisely.
but it's each individual team leader's responsibility to A, demonstrate the behaviors that are associated with responsiveness and collaboration in this example, and hold their team accountable for those behaviors that create that demeanor as you had used before. So while the organization defines it, it really is every leader's responsibility to emulate, to behave in that way, and to hold others accountable. Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And that can both be a wonderful thing and a challenge for leaders because, especially if you're somebody who's newly in a leadership role or have never really just had the situation to take a moment to think about that, it can be a challenging thing to look around and be like, okay, so first of all, I'm an example that people are looking to about what this should look like. B, I need to be thinking about what I need to be showing my team or trying to prioritize for my team so that we can figure out how we can then align with that bigger picture ideal going on in the company across the board while still making it work for us where we are and the way that we work and all of those things. Culture can be something where certain pieces are going to be universal and then there may be certain aspects of that that might be similar, but just have a slightly different way of being applied when it comes team to team or leader to leader. So it's having that mindful intentionality about locking in on showing those things the way that you want to, but also being intentional about preparing your people for success and being able to do it in a way that they feel like they can take ownership of and really be able to make work for them in the way that they work and what they need based on how they do what they do.
I'm
What
sure you've worked with a number of organizations. Do you have any examples you can share of what the culture looked like before you worked with them and the challenges that they faced versus what they might have looked like after you worked with them and how you helped build that culture and build an environment where employees want to stay and be loyal to that company?
Absolutely. I won't name any specific names of places that I've been, but there have been a few different instances where I've been working places where there've either been some acquisitions, so we had to bridge differentials of expectations in the way communication happened and certain things like that, or even just some similar ideas to what their culture should feel like, but possibly some different language about how things were being expressed. And taking a moment to be able to start bringing people together and get them to share what their views are on, hey, when I say communication and transparency, what does that mean over here? What does that mean over here? 80% of the time, in my experience, those have been going after the same priorities, but they're just talking about them just differently enough that they aren't necessarily feeling the trust in the middle yet. And so being able to bring the right people together in the room and just talk through what those standards would need to feel like so that everybody could feel like they were on the same page there and following and embracing the same priority. And the neat thing about it is when you have those discussions in trust and in that open vulnerability about it and really set the stage for people to be coming together for a common priority, showing that positive faith in each other that we can find that middle ground, and then beginning the conversation around some of those pieces where they might not have been realizing they were intersecting, but then coming to a middle ground where everybody's using the same language and you're able to meet each other in understanding. You're left with something where people are feeling like they've been part of defining where we're going and being able to make it work not only for the bigger picture, but it still feels authentic to them. And the nice thing about it is in those situations, you build a foundation that leads to trust while people are growing, that gives strong roots while other things might be changing, so that you can really be driving the long term success and progress that you hope for when you're looking at something as fundamental and important as culture.
Lauren, I'd love to share with you an experience I had, which I don't think I realized I had this experience until you just talked about that, especially when you've got mergers and acquisitions, and it's flooded me. So I'd love to share that with you and the
Love
experience
to hear it.
that, well, thank you, that I had there. So what happened is we had two organizations coming together, two organizations who had extremely different and opposite cultures. And we were put on teams where you would have some from culture A and some from culture B, and we were smushed together, which I do believe is the right thing to do. The challenge is that the people from company A didn't understand the culture of company B and vice versa. And so there was a lot of headbutting and a lot of negative feelings that came up on that team. Now, that was many years ago. What I didn't connect until right now when you were talking about that is fast forward to the last probably 15 years of my career being on many teams that have come together, that where the team had different cultures, or where the two organizations have come together and you've mixed teams. Either situation, it works well. One of the things that I always try to get those teams to do is to create new cultural norms, meaning the here's how we behave and here's how we work. And it's interesting because we did an episode on guiding principles, and that feeds in a lot there because Adam, who was our guest there, he said one of his guiding principles was we always say yes. And I'm like, wait, that's also a cultural norm on a team. Like when a client comes to us, we say yes, and then we figure out how we're going to do it. But also, like, we bring our team into the collaboration or whatever you want that culture to look like. You set standards for your team so that you're all starting from the same playing field instead of playing out of two completely different playbooks.
Absolutely. And when you lay that groundwork that way, you're able to get everybody to a common line of expectations. So they're not automatically left feeling like they need to be wary of the steps that are moving forward and the progress that might be being made. They don't feel like it's leaving them behind in any way. They
Mhm.
feel like they're connected and part of the forward together that you hope for and strive for at that point. And part of that's also just needing to have those open discussions where people are able to say, hey, these are areas that are really important to me. This is why we've done what we've done. This is why this has been such a big deal to us. And if they're very much, you know, committed to certain aspects of what it had looked like before, you also might need to set some expectations that, you might have to let go a little bit of what your way had been in that give and take of being able to find a new norm and a new, way forward together. But I think when that openness and that communication is taking place, it doesn't feel like something that's just being shoved on people as a result of something like that. So you're not left with this hard feeling of I didn't get a say in the matter, and so I'm just here, which is something important to be thinking about as leaders. You need to be explaining to the extent that you're able to why some of those decisions are being made and not just be dictating, okay, but this is how it's going to be. Because if your culture isn't working for the team the way they are and what they need, it's not going to feel like it belongs to them and they're not going to be excited about being a part of it.
Well, and that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't feel like the culture belonged to me because I was company B that got bought. And so I felt like I was being forced into company A's culture that it was deep and it was specific. And I actually was unable to put my finger on what was specifically different about their culture. It would have been great if somebody said, "Here's what we expect. Here is what our culture is." Then I could have fit into it instead of trying to figure out or guessing what that culture was and how I needed to behave.
Yeah, I think you both said something really interesting, and the 2 words I wrote down, openness and intentionality. And I think that was lacking, Regina, in your experience.
Yes.
If someone just came in and expected you to assimilate, using a word from Star Trek, and the Borg came in and expected you just to assimilate. And sorry, see, hey, we're getting very nerdy here.
You just showed all your nerd.
I just showed all.
And you don't see it right
I,
now, but we're all like just celebrating the fact that that just happened. So we made it. Own and rock your nerd listeners. Like, this is wonderful. But
I,
That was
so
priceless. Okay,
trying to
go
get
back to the Borg.
go back to the board, being very serious for a second without
The
laughing.
Borg. The
The
Borg.
Borg. Yes, the
Yes,
Borg.
the Borg.
Assimilation, yes, and Jean-Luc Picard would be very proud of us right now. But the assimilation was just expected. No one came in, and it probably felt a little bit like the Borg was coming in and saying, "No, this is how it is. We're not gonna accept anything else," as opposed to being more of, and I can't remember the character's name that was more empathetic, the empath on the Star Trek series, but being able to understand what other people were feeling and thinking and needing. And Lauren, going back to what you said, is bringing those 2 groups together and having that openness. And I think the challenge that we sometimes face is, especially in mergers and acquisitions, is you've got very strong personalities that just assume that everyone is going to, again, assimilate to what we are bringing in because we're the bigger company. We just bought you out. Of course, you're going to assimilate to what we've created in our culture without even telling you what it is. We just expect you to know it and not share it, not say why it was important to us, and then not give you an opportunity from an openness standpoint to share your thoughts and feelings and emotions about all of this that's going on. And that's a very difficult situation. And I'll just quickly add, because I worked for 2 very different organizations, one that was very, very large, and we always said it felt like a giant ship that if you wanted to turn it, it would take years in order to turn this ship. And then I worked for a very small company, and when I started with that organization, it felt very entrepreneurial. It was a very it was a speedboat, and you could turn it on a dime, and you could make changes very quickly as you needed to. And so I think that's also important to recognize when you are dealing with larger or smaller organizations, that the larger the organization, the more challenging it very likely is to make any of those changes or listen to what other people have to say or need to say, and allowing for a change in culture or allowing for questions about culture and why is this important, and being able to have those kinds of meetings and sessions with leadership to share why this is going to work for our organization and why it's going to help us grow.
oh,
Doris,
absolutely. And
was it
go ahead.
Mr. Spock who was the empath?
He was on the first season. I was
Oh, but
more of
you're on
a
the
I
next
was next
generation.
generation.
Was it Wesley?
No, it was the girl.
Oh, I don't remember a
It was
girl.
number
Okay.
two's love interest.
Oh, okay. I just figured that we needed to probably wrap that part up because I felt like it was really important. Go on, Lauren. You were going to say something.
Just to add to, and no disrespect to our passionate Star Trek fandom out there, but can leave in the comments who it was that we should have been aware of just then in that discussion. But another thing to add to what we've been sharing about, anytime there's a shift in membership of a team, it could be hiring in a new employee, it could be bringing somebody in into a different function within the same organization or promotion or whatever it might be. It's important to continue to be transparent and really listen to their feelings and thoughts about what the culture is and how they fit into it and all of that. It's also important to keep in mind that just because something had been a certain way on a team or in an organization, culture can be something that can be changed, and
Mhm.
figuring out what is going to be the best thing going forward may not always be what it had been, but there's a concept called organizational climate that we'll be talking about on a second episode. Spoiler
Yep.
alert, the nerdy fun continues, that you can use to figure out what that should look like or maybe what steps to take. But having that understanding about what the current personality of the team or organization are in the cultural norms can do a lot to let you understand maybe who you need on the team, what steps you should be taking,
Mhm.
what all's going on, and figure out how you can really lean into and own how that can end up motivating and energizing the progress that you're all making together.
I love it. Thanks,
Mhm.
Lauren. Doris, what are a few of your takeaways? I've got a couple that I want to share, but you want to start with some of your takeaways?
Yeah, I think the one that I just shared a second ago, the openness and
Mhm.
intentionality, and I think intentionality, it might be the most important word is that you're intentional with not only your culture, but sharing that culture and being open to the questions or the pushback in some cases that you may receive, and making sure that you are able to hear and really active listening, really listen to what it is that your team is telling you when they are pushing back so that you have a full understanding of why they have some challenges. And a couple of other ones was the same language, speaking the same language. And I think that's really important so that when you have those sessions, when you're trying to work together and you have that open dialogue, that by the end of that discussion, and that discussion may be more than one meeting, but by the end of that discussion, that you all do have the same language. And then going back to that those words on the wall, the mission and the values that you have, that everyone really believes in those words and that they live those words every day from a behavior standpoint, which is, Regina, something that you use that to kick off the session today, was talking about behaviors and living those
Mhm.
every single day.
Yeah, and then I agree with you, and just to add one more little point to your last point, one of the things that really got me is that while it is an organization's job to define what the culture should be, it is the leader and each individual team members to make micro decisions and perform micro behaviors every day that align with that definition of what the culture should be. I think the other thing that I wanted to add, and I think everybody heard it click for me actually during this call, was around individual teams as they're forming. And then even Lauren added in, as you're just adding a new person, revisiting that team culture and those expectations on how we treat each other and how we treat our clients, our partners, our customers, how we interact with them and how we interact with our own team is a really good best practice to ensure that everyone knows what your culture is. Something to add,
Mhm.
Doris?
No, I was just, as you that point before, I saw Lauren silently applauding what you were talking about
She
with
really
the
did.
micro behaviors. Yes. And so I know she really liked that point.
Just a little bit.
And we gotta start doing video one day because she actually did start, like, silent clapping. I was
Mhm.
like, "Ooh, obviously I got a good one in here." That was great. That was great. Well, this has been a great episode. I'm really looking forward to our next episode too, where we dig into the climate and where our listeners can learn about how to figure out where you are on your cultural scale. So now you know what the culture is supposed to be, but actually figuring out, are you where you're supposed to be? And then what you can do to either keep it or change it. Does that sound
Mhm.
about right, Lauren?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Guys, that is about it for today's session. We would love to talk to you, get to know you more. All of our links are found in the show notes. You can find Lauren's information there as well. And you can follow us on this journey as we delve into all things leadership. So we'd love to have a review. We actually lost all of our reviews. We don't know how, we don't know why. We've gotten one back. Thank you, Heather. But if you would just take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and comment on what you like about our podcast, we would be forever grateful as we rebuild that. Actually, it's part of the algorithm. So the way that our podcast gets to new listeners is through those reviews. And if you'd be interested in being a guest like Lauren, and maybe you have an engaging topic, we'd love to talk to you. So just reach out to us at leaderishpodcast@gmail.com with your desired topic and some information about how we can stalk you. And we'll follow up. We'll schedule a little chat and we'll get you in on a future episode. So anyway, ladies, this has been a fabulous conversation today. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.